Good morning, everyone. We're just going to let people file in here and get ready. Welcome. Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. We're going to talk a little bit about InfoSparks today and the super regional. Give you guys another minute or two to come in, and we'll get started here in about 2 minutes. Fantastic. I'm seeing everyone filing in here. I remember we had about 50 or so registrations, so it's great to see our attendees list really high today. That's awesome.
We went up to 77, Jay.
Awesome. Great. So welcome, everyone. Seeing some familiar names here in the list, seeing some familiar people. And we're just going to give everyone another minute or so here to get logged in. While that's happening, just some introductions and some rules for today. My name is Jay Pepper Martins. I'm your Director of MLS and IT for services at the MLS. It's obviously been a pretty crazy couple of months for me. We deployed a new system. It's got a lot more data in it. But the things that I really wanted to achieve with this system were giving you apps that had all of the data in it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. My co-pilot for today's webinar is Genevieve. Many of you have probably met her or spoken with her. She's our events and communications person. She does a lot of coordination in the office. I couldn't do my job without her. And so Jen's gonna do things like take a look at the Q&A window today. So if you've got some questions about today's material, please put it in the Q&A. If you just want to use the chat window to talk amongst yourselves, that's fine too. But we're not gonna take questions just from the general chat. We're gonna try to take questions from the Q&A window. Should have a button you can press to open that up. Just some notes on what I can address today and what I can't. I'm going to answer questions about the super regional data in InfoSparks. I'm going to try to stay focused on just this product today. So while I realize that many of you may be experiencing an issue with maybe a report somewhere, or you can't see a piece of data in some other tool where you're used to seeing it, we're actually not going to cover that today. But if you put those questions in the Q&A, I will funnel them to the MLS team, and we'll try to respond to as many of those as we possibly can. But today we're going to be focused on solutions and moving forward, and some great changes coming that are here already in InfoSparks, and some other stuff that's coming in InfoSparks later this year. Some good stuff coming. So we are a few minutes past the hour, so I think we're about ready to get started. Jen, you got the Q&A window open so that if we see anything filter in, we can take a look at those. And great. Okay, well, welcome everyone. I'm glad you're all here today. It looks like we've got a strong group of people. As I said, we're going to talk about the super regional post-launch and its interactions with a product I love called InfoSparks, which is one of our flagship products that used to only have data for the city and county of San Francisco. But of course, then we launched a project called the NorCal MLS Alliance's Super Regional. We call ours the Super Regional. I think Barry's calls theirs MLS Plus or Barry's Plus. I don't know that MLS Listings has a new name for it, but we call ours the Super Regional version of the MLS because it's got all the data for the entire Bay Area. And why did we do this? Why is it important to you? Well, we wanted to stop the need for you to enter your listing 2 and 3 times in different systems and to learn different technologies for other MLSs. And we wanted you to have a place to go where you could search the whole Bay Area and see all of the inventory in one place. And points 2 and 3 here are reports with all the data and maps that show everything. And these are the 2 goals that we're going to talk about today, is reports with all the data. And I'm going to show you some cool stuff with maps. So let's talk about InfoSparks outside of San Francisco. And we'll talk specifically about zip codes. We're going to look at making your own polygons and using those areas that you create yourself to create custom reports. Pretty neat stuff. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right into the MLS and we'll do some concrete examples and I'll walk you through what I'm talking about. So here I am logged into the dashboard. Let's see, I've got my tools. There's my 10K InfoSparks. It's this icon with kind of the K in it. I don't think we're going to change this icon. So the 10K name is kind of a legacy name, but this icon, everyone sort of knows what it is. So I don't think we're going to change it anytime soon. So just keep your eye out for that one. And it's market stats and analytics. Used to be just for San Francisco. And now it's, of course, for far more than that. So where are we at today? Where are we at today with the system today? As I said, from my dashboard, I'm going to click here to get to my InfoSparks tool and load up what we have done so far and take a look at where we're going. So today, yes?
Oh, never mind. Sorry.
Oh, was my screen lagging for a second? Sometimes that still happens with Zoom.
No, we're getting reports of a black screen.
Okay, we can see if it's, oh, one person says it fixed itself.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, I think we're okay now. If you can't see anything though, please keep doing what you're doing. That's great. Let me know if you can't see it. So here we are in InfoSparks, and of course it still loads with the default view. So right now it loads the data for San Francisco County, and it loads data for any sources that it's got. Right now we are partitioning our data based on if it came from Barrie's, if it came from Metrolist, or if it came from San Francisco. We are going to add the two names for Paragon and the one for MLS listings for south of us to show those data sources. Right now, all of that data is grouped under San Francisco, but we're working on splitting that data back into three. So you'll be able to do things like look at just the data that came from San Francisco, look at just the data that came from Barrie's. And maybe that's not important for you to do in San Francisco County, but what if you wanted to do that in Marin and use Marin County? Now, this never used to work. This never used to be available. But now you can actually load Marin and you'll be able to do comparisons between San Francisco and Marin. And you can, glide along the line just like you always used to be able to in our old solution. And you'll see across the bottom that we've now got a couple of new dimensions. Cumulative DOM has been added, that's CDOM. And again, you won't be able to see a specific listings CDOM, but you'll be able to see the aggregate, the stats on CDOM, which is kind of cool. So just looking through the data again, I've been able to do just a brute force comparison of two different counties. Pretty wicked, pretty cool. I could even go further and do it again. If you've never seen anyone do this in InfoSparks, you can have up to 4 areas that you can compare at the same time. So this time I'm going to choose Napa, and now I can see that we're not, Napa's quite a bit lower, right? So if I look at the values in Marin, comparable to San Francisco, values in Napa, we're just looking at median sales price here. And I'm seeing that, of course, very different. This gives you a chance to do a compare. But you can get more detailed than this. The really great part about the new implementation is that it supports zip codes, something that it supported a little for San Francisco before, but we used to always focus on our district and subdistricts. Outside of San Francisco, they do have district numbers, but they're more like area numbers. They're larger and they don't really look and feel like our districts, but zip codes are very common. So now you're going to be able to look at various zip codes. And I'm just going to pull open a spreadsheet and take a look at some values for zip code. And we'll do some compares. Okay, so let's resume. And take a look at some zip codes. Let's get rid of Marin, and let's leave San Francisco as our baseline county. And let's go down to the zip code block and open that up. And let's look at something maybe on the peninsula. I think if I do 94080 should give me some. So I can look at a specific zip code that's down the peninsula and compare that data to the city. And that gives me, again, all of the dimensions that I want to recalculate on. I can look at new listings. You can see in that specific area, For February, 76 new listings just in zip code 94903, whereas in the city, of course, we had 1,300. I can go through all of the different metrics and dimensions along the bottom, and I can look at any of those too. So zip codes, brand new piece of functionality that only comes with the super regional, lets you compare two zip codes to one another, lets you compare the sort of averages for a whole region, like San Francisco in this case, to just a zip code. You could also look at San Mateo County. So you could look at, here's the green line showing me San Mateo's, 94903 is in San Mateo, I believe, and then you can compare that to San Francisco. So you can see here that we're still missing some data in the list for organizations. When we split out the SBAR data back into Paragon and MLS listings, we'll be able to fill in some of the data that's missing right now. But the reciprocal data from Barrie's, MetroList all pulled in and being recalculated on the fly. So there's still some gaps, but we are actively working on getting that data filled. But I wanted to show you that you can compare two different counties and also integrate things like zip codes. So what if that's not good enough? What if the zip code is just too brute force? It just includes things you don't want. How would you do something better? And the way to do something really better in InfoSparks is to use this tab at the top called My Areas. It's up here, the top right corner. So I'm going to click on My Areas. It's going to load up a map of the peninsula. But down here in the bottom right-hand corner, I can actually zoom out. I can zoom out pretty far. And because I know that the NorCal MLS Alliance has data from, Novato, Solano, all the way over to Sacramento County, down through Alameda, Contra Costa, even some of the Central Valley and down into San Jose, San Mateo, I can actually create my own polygons, my own areas that I want to analyze for any region that's part of the super regional. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in into the Barrie's territory where I know my data is pretty solid. And I'm going to do an example up here around Weinberg, Shelville, Temelec. Let's just zoom in a little more and I'll show you what I'm going to do. So I want to work with a buyer who's interested in understanding the numbers for this area. I'm going to choose a polygon tool from the top and I'm going to draw this really neat area. It's going to have all of the pieces that I want to include in the analysis because this is where my client said they're really interested in living. Now, maybe they have a job in this area, you know how it goes. They're looking for something in an area, they really like an area. So now I've closed that polygon by clicking on the last point. And when I click save, it's going to ask me, do I want to create a new area? I do. I'm just going to call it Sonoma. And when I click save, it's going to run some basic attribute stats for me. It's going to show me how many square miles did I just create a polygon for, and how much data did it find, closed data, sold data, did it find inside that polygon. And so for this area that I'm custom defining, I can now see that there are 13,029 listings, certainly more than were ever input through the SFAR MLS system. So this is going to have all the data in it from Barrie's, MetroList, San Francisco, looking really good. So I'm going to save it, and I'm going to close this. And now watch this. When I go back to the InfoSparks tab, I've got my San Francisco default county. I'm going to click the add area like I was doing before. This time, I'm going to go down to this button, My Areas, and it should hopefully have some values in it that I've created. And you can see, of course, it's got this new one I just made, Sonoma, crunching the numbers. And it also had another one I created before, which I'm going to load back up too. I'm going to compare all three. So I had created an area for the Santa Rosa area also. And now you'll be able to show your clients data from the city and also from polygons you create yourself outside the city. Now, we do have plans to create some reports, and I'll go to the reports tab in a second, that will build you some very nice PDFs for some predefined areas. And I'll show you which ones we're going to do in a moment. But right now, you can already analyze this data yourself using the built-in tools to go and create your own custom areas. Now, what can you do with this data? Presumably, you're not able to sit with your client right now. There's no side-by-side experience. But what you can do is there's a button in InfoSparks called Share. If I click this Share button, it gives me a couple of options. And these options are pretty awesome. So what I can do is I can share a static link. Essentially, I'm going to share what we're seeing right now, and it will never change when the data changes. I could share it as a PDF. And if we do that, it's going to give me an opportunity to download it. When I get a PDF for it, it'll just be a document that I can share, something I can send to my client, just represents the graph. But what if you wanted to do something even more sophisticated, even neater? Well, you could change these controls and say, I want something that's going to change over time as more data gets filled in. As Jay continues to work with the other MLSs to fill in these data gaps, I would like the graphs that I'm analyzing to update automatically from links that I'm going to make. So instead of using static, which just need a PDF, I'm going to use the live link, and I'm going to grab an embeddable code that's going to give me something I can put on my blog, I could put on my website, or I could take the URL out of it and I could put it inside an email. I'm going to show you what that's going to look like. If you email this to your client, they would be able to click on the link and be able to load a live graph. This is bookmarkable. There's some information in this URL that's encoded to you. So right now mine says J Pepper Martins, yours will say you. And this link will be live so that if the data changes in a week, so imagine next week that I figure some problem out and we're able to load in another 15,000 missing listings, these averages will recalculate and this bookmark will not have to be changed. You'll just be able to tell your client, oh, refresh that page, or you can email them the link again, but the link will be the same. And of course, because it's a little snippet of code, I chose the embeddable option. I could grab this and I could put this in a blog, or if you have any kind of a content management website, I know Playster makes one, a couple of other vendors have pretty good ones too. You'd be able to put that in. So that's how you use these different kinds of share options right natively from here. I'm going to close that. And this time I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the dimensions. So right now, yes?
Sorry, we have a few questions.
Oh, sure. Let's stop and let's take a look at that.
Okay, first question is, can I select single family only for county level? I am able to do that by zip code comparison.
You should be able to always choose these dimensions for any of these, including your own custom areas. So let's do the Sonoma example here. I'm going to grab Sonoma and I'm going to set it to just condominiums, which they have. And I can see that the Sonoma data for just condominiums is split out now from any of the other types. Or I could choose just the single family homes. And now I'm looking at just the SFR data. And I'm doing that for my custom area that I've built. Thank you to the person who gave you the heads up about 903 actually being in San Rafael. That's my bad. And then Jacqueline was also asking a question about where should I find the zip codes. I use Google to find out what the zip codes are. And I use that quite a bit to do things like, if I'm going to do a test of an area, I want to see if the data in one MLS is the same as the data in the other. I just Google it every time, which is why I couldn't remember where 903 was, because I just use Google.
And then one more question.
Sure.
Can I share multiple categories, say DOM and median sales price in one share, or do I have to do one each?
Unfortunately, you do have to do one each. There's no current way to bring both graphs onto the same one. And the reason for that is on the left-hand side where you see the scale. So right now, this is the inventory of active listings I'm looking at. And you can see that the scale ranges on the left side from 0 to 800. And it recalculates. InfoSparks has this really nice feature where it figures out what the limits are. And then it tries to build all of its graphics and all of its tables based on those high and low limits. So for example, this is 800 at the top to 0. If I go to sales price, that doesn't make any sense. Here we have 0.6 million at the bottom to 1.8 million up at the top. So there isn't currently a way to overlay those graphs with each other. It is best to do some side-by-side comparisons that allow you to say, have a look at these dimensions or have a look at this statistic. Okay, so I'm just going to take two more questions here quickly, and then I'm going to dive back in. The next one is, how would I compare year to date for a sub-district, Jan-Feb? So if I'm just looking for ways to do comparisons, I would jump to the reports. And actually, I'm going to address that in a second. So I'll get to that question shortly, Susan. And then one last question was, the new listing sold count for East Bay. No, the current counts for East Bay and MLS listings have merged that data into the S4 MLS dimension. And so right now it's not correct. We're still working on that data, but we have the data for berries and MetroList pulled in today. So right now, if I was going to build some of my own custom areas, which I'll go back to, you can see that I'm working mainly on building custom areas in the North Bay and in the Sacramento area because I know my data there is really solid. I'm still working on getting on the rest of the data for the East Bay and MLS listings territories fully loaded. But here's the really cool part. If you use those live links I showed you a second ago, you could make for yourself some bookmarks and you could check if you wanted to, every couple of days. But I'll be making sure that I send out a notification in the next week or so when I get all the rest of that data loaded. You'll see us sending out an email message about that. Also, I've been posting some of that information on my blog. If you haven't been seeing what's going on at resfar.info, this is where I put all my blog posts, and then Emily, Genevieve, and I make sure we try to promote these on social media and get these out to you. So looking back into the InfoSparks tool, I want to talk now about the Reports tab. The Reports tab has always had this really cool dynamic map where you could see all of San Francisco, but it's got that hard stop line. So today we have these really great reports that are based on our districts, and if you click on a district, our selling areas. So I could look at all of Bayview, and when I click on Bayview, I get my year-to-date, month-to-month comparisons in a very nice, very clean, single-page summary report. Now we know that these are really handy for just like, blasting this really good-looking thing and having it as an attachment you can share with clients and stuff. It could be an email attachment. You can cut and paste parts out of this. We're licensed to edit these. So you could, if you want to download it, maybe just snap a piece of the table, like perhaps you just want to look at just the condos co-ops. Maybe this is what's important. You could grab that. You could share that. We also want to make these tools, these reports, we want to customize them for other areas that are in the super regional. What areas are we going to customize? To tell you about those areas that we're going to build new reports for, I'm going to jump to the MLS and go to our interactive map. So if you haven't already seen it, the newest version of the interactive map that we have deployed inside the MLS system is absolutely the most powerful mapping and listing data tool that you have access to. You can literally see every listing from the entire NorCal MLS Alliance data share. Our super regional version has already loaded all of that data. Even though I haven't got that data loaded in InfoSparks yet, you can bet it's all in here. I mean, we still are debugging a few specific instances of one listing here not transmitting and one here, but I'm going to zoom out here and you're going to see as I pan across all of the data. And this just like, I love seeing all those dots, right? I can keep going. There's Pleasanton. I can scroll, go north. If there's a listing in the Bay Area, we've got it. I'm going to put a little asterisk on that because the last thing I'm going to talk about today is coming soon. So now I can see all of the listings in the reciprocal. So how are we going to make InfoSparks reports? Well, one of the things we're working on is looking at this layer. You'll see here that I opened up the layer panel and I went to NorCal Alliance areas. I'm going to close that panel. And you can see here now that we have polygons that make sense using the selling areas for berries. We have their map data layers. This is the polygon set that their members, and you may have been, used to using when you would SSO into the berries system. So our plan is to create market stats reports in our system for these reciprocal areas based on their polygons. We've also got the selling areas for down the peninsula in a similar situation where we know these are the polygons. These are the selling areas that the MLS listings associations are used to using. So we're going to try to re-implement them. Now, I notice in MLS listings territory particularly that they have, I would say, more granular. Like their selling areas are kind of like our sub-districts. They don't have them grouped together. So I'm going to be working with MLS listings to try to understand how do they group these together when they're doing reports. That's what we're going to build reports for. And then the last piece of the puzzle is how do we build reports for the East Bay? Well, the East Bay system actually doesn't have map layers like we're used to using. So we are currently working with the East Bay MLSs to figure out how can we start to design polygons, and we're going to collaborate with them on building that. That's something they're working on for their own system too. So those things are coming, but these things may be deployed incrementally. So one of the big things I wanted to make sure I conveyed today was you've got so much data now in these tools, and more features are coming. Every week, we move the ball a little further forward on some of these tools. So while I understand that there's still some ongoing issues and there's some feeling like we still have some problems, and we definitely do, we are working on those full time, and we are bringing you new features. So just to go back up to the top and recap where we're headed. Right now today in InfoSparks, you've got all of the data loaded from Berries and MetroList. And the SFAR MLS data has lots of the data loaded from MLS listings in the East Bay, but not all of it. So we're going to be splitting out the Paragon data from East Bay and the MLS listings data into its own organization. We're going to make sure we're loading all that data, and that's going to get deployed to you very soon. On the heels of that data being available, we're going to be adding new reports so that when you come to this tab and land on it the first time, you'll no longer have this hard cutoff line here where it just stops. You'll also be able to zoom out, and you're going to be able to get market reports that use these selling areas that we're getting from our reciprocal partners. And lastly, on the My Areas tab, you can already go in and create some of your own areas with high confidence that the data is in really good shape for any area that would be part of Berries, any area that would be part of MetroList, and for sure for the city. So you could, and I've shown this to some people too, not necessarily follow our districts and sub-districts map. You could create your own polygon. Maybe this is relevant to a client you're working with. Very easy to create, very fast. Once I've got that saved, I can just call this north of Golden Gate. Save it up. And be able to retrieve all of the listing data for that custom polygon. And look at that, 5.3 square miles and 15,296 listings. Now, that's going back for as far back as we could get data. From the reciprocal MLSs, we went back as far as 2006, 2005 in many cases. So you really are going to get all of the listing data, even if it wasn't entered in San Francisco's MLS, is now going to be calculated in your custom polygon in your stat. So I can go and compare that now. Go back to my InfoSparks tab, and let's load up what the sales price medians are compared to the whole city. I'm going to compare it to my newly created Golden Gate Park North. And once it renders, you'll see that's a pretty darn expensive area, as you guys well know. You can drift along the line. And again, all shareable in an interactive way too. So, don't hesitate to go in and play with these tools. Grab the live link, do a little share for yourself. So here I'm going to actually grab a CSV file where you can see the numbers that were being used to generate that graph. So maybe you like to generate a lot of your own charts in Excel, but you can actually pull up. Let me see if I can find the right Excel window. Here we go. So you can actually pull up the aggregate data that was used to create that graph, which is super handy. This lets you do things like build your own tables, build your own graphs. Or if you want to do this every month, maybe you have a regular day of the month, you want to pull this data, you can create your own overtime trends and averages because you have access to the raw data. Awesome. Okay, so I'd like to stop here again. I know I covered a lot about custom areas and like how we're going to use the selling areas from the North Bay. Are there any other questions? Let's stop there and take a look.
We do have a few questions. First question is, how would you compare year to date for a sub-district January, February 2021 to January, February 2020, or quarterly?
So right now, that's a good question. Right now in the reports tab, we don't generate those comparisons based on quarters, but we do create them based on monthly reports. So you can actually go back and you can look at previous months and you can do the analysis yourself. So I just went to the whole city and I'm going to look at May 2016 and view that report. So here's my monthly indicator from May 2016. And if I wanted to compare that to say May 2017, I could go and pull the May 2017 data too, and I could compare month to month. But as for being able to do it for entire quarters, there isn't an elegant way right now for us to do grouping by quarter. But what we can do is we can look at the annual reports, which compare year over year. And we can look at the annual reports. We've been buying this for members. We've been paying for this to be a report generated for all of our members since 2015. I can look at the report for 2017, and I can pull that entire year in summary analysis. So I know that doesn't fully answer your question, but hopefully you see a path to getting at some of the answers that you'd want to be able to do that comparison.
Okay. Next question. Sorry, I was a bit late. Is the new listing / sold count for East Bay accurate? Do we get pre-launch super regional merger data?
Right. So as I indicated, we currently have all of the data for Barrie, San Francisco, and MetroList, and we're loading the rest of the data for East Bay and MLS listings on the fly.
Okay. Next question. Can you do just a month-over-month comparison?
So I think I showed you guys how you might want to do that. You can go back in time and you can select an area for any time period you want. So maybe if you're looking at District 5 and you wanted to retrospectively go back and look at what were the numbers like between September to October, you could go back and look at the October information, which would show you the information from that month and that year-to-date information. You could then pull the one for the month prior, and you could do some A/B comparisons yourself by having them side by side.
And when is the complete monthly data available, daily or after the end of the month?
Oh, great question. So basically, when is the data good, right? So what we always do is the data for the previous month will include transactions that get closed up to 7 days after, because often the close date will be for a day prior, which could be included in that data set. So what we do is on the 7th, we crunch the numbers. On the 8th and 9th, it gets kind of like a quick cursory analysis check. And by the 10th of every month, the previous month's data is spot on. So if I was going to put a reminder in my Outlook calendar, I would go in and set one for the 10th of every month, and I'd recur that to be a monthly reminder to, hey, go grab the new monthly report, because that information will be up to date on the morning of the 10th or 11th.
Okay. And last question, in general, if you want to pull stats for the previous month, example, median price for the city for February, is there an ideal day to pull the data?
So a similar answer to that question. I would make sure that on the 9th, 10th, 11th, that's when I'm checking, because on the 10th, that's when you can be guaranteed that you'll have your up-to-date numbers for the previous month. Awesome. So today's webinar was really meant to be informational and sort of show you what's possible and capable here, what you can do today. The other really great part about this product is there's a thing called the user manual, which is customized for us. And this user manual even tells you how all of the calculations are done. A question I'll often see in an email is someone will say, Jay, I ran the InfoSparks graph, and I would like to know how all these definitions are done. How is month's supply calculated? Well, you can go into the help system for that. And if you look at month's supply, you're going to be able to find out how that is done. And there you go. The inventory of homes for sale at the end of a given month divided by the average monthly pending sales from the previous 12 months, the previous year. It is in some MLS, they call it absorption rate. So if you're ever curious what some of those dimensions, how are they being calculated or what do they mean? All the definitions are explained very accurately and very appropriately here. Also, you'll be able to find some help on how to manage your My Areas. If you created a polygon, you don't want it anymore, you can delete it. All of that stuff is covered in here too. So please do come and check it out. And if you were curious about how do some of those sharing options work, the descriptions here are really good. It's going to give you some help on when would I choose to do an embeddable versus just a social media or an email share, which will just give you a raw link. And because I love doing that so much, I'm going to go grab another one and show you. I'm going to load up my custom area. And I'm going to add one more. And then I'm going to share this link in a live social media embeddable link. I'm going to copy this. and I'm going to put it in the chat window. So let's see if I can figure out how to find the chat window here, Jen. Got it. Okay, cool. So I'm going to put this in the chat window. Now, what you can do as panelists, as attendees, is you can click on that link. And when you do, you're going to find out that you've got an interactive web page that you can actually use the same hover over the line to look at the exact values for the graph, that you can see those values. So if you set that to your client, they're going to have this interactivity too. So there's some really powerful, cool things you can do with this share link. And it won't be very high effort on your end. You can do these things pretty quickly and get them set up, and then you can reuse them over and over and over again. Yeah, this tool is going to be a major part of our offering as SFAR MLS into the future. We love that we're adding more reports to it and getting it more robust with features. There's also some brand new functionality coming in this application, but I don't think I should talk about that just yet. So earlier in today's presentation, I had a reminder to myself, an asterisk, to talk about getting all the data and what data do we still maybe not have. So I'm going to go back to the MLS. And show you some information about my basic searchability. If I go to a standard search, what I can do right now is using the statuses, let's make this a little bigger for everyone. I can search for all of the active, contingent, canceled, pending, expired, all of that data from all of our reciprocal MLSs. That data is all loaded. The one status that is not quite done yet is coming soon. And so what happens if I just look for the coming soon data? What you get back is the coming soon data that's been entered in SFAR MLS, regardless of what location or county it's in. So if an SFAR member put this coming soon listing in the system, you can search it. Now that does mean, of course, is that almost all of that data is for the city of San Francisco, true. But there is also some coming soon data being entered for the other counties, being entered by our members into our system. Now, how are we going to get the rest of that coming soon data? Well, your volunteers on the MLS and Technology Committee and staff have been working, as hard as they possibly can to try to get this information reconciled. So what you're seeing here right now is the MLS names across the top. All of the rules for how coming soon data works is in the leftmost column. And anything you see here that's green or blue means we've already figured out how we're going to do it. We just have a couple of items left to figure out, and then we're going to be able to get that data loaded right in our native MLS. So right now, I know it's a major heartburn for people that, are these people entering listings? Is it honoring clear cooperation? How do I know? Maybe it's a NorCal MLS agent, an agent from Barry's who took a listing in the city. They've got different rules. They put it in coming soon in their system, but you still can't see it. But they still did make sure they put it in the MLS. We've got to solve this. We're working on it full time. We will get this coming soon data to you very, very soon. And with that, that concludes my material for today. I'll leave the questions panel open for a minute, and Jen and I will continue to field any remaining questions if you have.
Yep, a few more came in. One is saying, from the previous answer, is that why the data from a CMA from the MLS different from the InfoSparks data?
Yes. Right now, if you're in the native MLS system, let's go back to SFAR MLS. If I'm, say, wanting to do a report based on San Mateo County, let's see, they said East Bay. Let's do Alameda. Well, let's change it to be cities, Oakland. And I'm only going to look at residential, single-family residences with maybe exactly 4 bedrooms. Okay, so there's 43 listings. So yes, right now the MLS system natively has all of that data. And if you can see it here, you can do whatever you'd like to do on it. So I'm going to select some listings that meet my criteria. You can see here I'm intentionally selecting ones with different source MLS origins. And then I can load that up and do a CMA. So yes, you're seeing all of the data here in the MLS system. We're going to have it all loaded here very soon. I was hoping to have it all loaded actually before today's webinar. My goal is to make sure that all of that data is there for the webinar that we're doing again in 2 weeks, the same webinar. So if you're interested to see if we were able to get all that data in, please go ahead and register for the same webinars today in 2 weeks, where I'll be covering all of this content again about making custom areas and using reports for outside San Francisco.
Okay, one more question. Will we be able to use reports for East Bay?
Yes, we are working to try to figure out how can we help them sort out their polygons for the East Bay. How will we be able to figure out a way to make reports that are the single, easy to click, one-page reports that work for East Bay? But because they don't have map data layers, we're actually working with them to try to figure out, can we build map data layers with you for use in InfoSparks? I think there's one question left. It's about the recording for today. We did record today, and we are going to try to make it available. I might go through it and polish it up a little bit, but we'll try to get that up on our member website soon, or on our YouTube channel. Jen, we have a YouTube channel somewhere? Oh, I think Jen's
Yes,
muted.
yes, we do. We do. I'll post that as well as the next event link as well.
Awesome. And so I look forward to seeing some of you there. And just keep your eyes peeled for email from Jen and Emily. We've got our Members Edge comes out pretty frequently, and we've been trying to send you a blast email whenever I update the blog. So just watch for those links and keep reading and stay safe out there, everybody, and take care.